Welcome to First Bite. We're back. Our interview show is back after, a full month off since we did our 49ers preview. But we don't need to get into that. My name is Jeremy Reisman. I'm the producer at Pride of Detroit. You can catch me at Detroit Online on Twitter. With me, filling in, I guess, as our First Bite co-host.
Spit it out.
It throws me off when we're not in our normal
seating
lineup
arrangement.
Here. I guess so. That's the way to put it. But you recognize the voice. He is, of course, the adequate host of the POD cast. He is our audio technical extraordinaire. He is Chris Perfett. How we doing, Chris?
Adequate replacement, really. Adequate fill-in. I will take. We're just gonna do all these kind of things. I'm doing all right. I'm just I don't know. I'm ready to go north of the border right now.
Yeah, let's get into it. Let's explain to the people why we're here. The Lions signed a pretty interesting prospect. I don't even know if prospect is the right word for it. The guy's been playing professional football for a few years now. Mathieu Betts, defensive end who was the most outstanding defensive player in Canadian football last year. I almost said college football. But I made sure I didn't say defensive player of the year because that's not what they call it up there. But anyways, to better know a player that has not played in the NFL, has not played in the American college system, we had to get ourselves a CFL expert, and so that's exactly what we did. So welcome our guest here. He is the editor and contributor for 3 Down Nation, the CFL publication, of course. You can find him at the JC Abbott. It's JC Abbott. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. I know I get a reputation for my my slights against the CFL, all in pure jest, of course. But whenever a guy whenever a guy comes along that wins some hardware, 18 sacks in 18 games, and suddenly they're a Detroit Lion, it certainly raises some eyebrows. So let's kind of start at the beginning with him. Outside, like, he has a shot with the Chicago Bears, won training camp, doesn't make the team, goes to the CFLs, and is the 3rd overall pick for the Edmonton Eskimos. But his career kind of burns out there relatively quickly. He's there for 3 years, 2 seasons, doesn't produce a lot of statistic there. So I don't know how closely you're following his career then, but is there an explanation for why he struggled right out of the gate?
Well, I think we actually have to take one more step back before we get into what happened in Edmonton, because Mathieu Betts is arguably, I would say, certainly one of the top 3 best players to come out of Canadian university football. He played at the Université de Laval up there in Quebec City, which is a powerhouse unlike any other. Take Alabama and what they do in the NCAA ranks and magnify that by 10. And that's what Laval was specifically at that era in Canadian university football, U Sports football. And
wow, the Alberta Dinos really fell off.
The Calgary Dinos have struggled a little bit here, yeah. But Laval was beating Calgary at that stage. When he was with the Rouge et Or, Mathieu Betts was his first year. He was the Canadian Rookie of the Year. And the next 3 seasons, he won what's called the JP Metris Trophy, which is given to the best lineman, either offensive or defensive, in the country. So you're talking about a guy who won an award every single year that he played in college football, all 4 seasons, and put up some crazy numbers. To me, he was, at that time, the best player that I'd ever seen come out of U Sports football. And frankly, he may still be that. There's a player coming out this year in this year's draft that may actually threaten him a little bit, but he is an elite prospect at that time. And that's why he ends up signing as a UDFA with the Chicago Bears, which happens from time to time. Guys will get shots out of U Sports football. Sometimes they'll even get drafted. In Betts' case, because of his size, it was a UDFA shot. And that's what delays his arrival to Edmonton, because normally when you get an NFL contract, you don't go very highly in the CFL draft because they know they have to wait on you. People like Mathieu Betts so much that he went 3rd overall, even though they knew they were going to have to wait on him, and there was a potential that they may never see him at all. So that's how highly he was thought of as a prospect. He comes in midway through the season after he's cut by the Bears, puts up some good numbers in that 2019 year. He only plays about 4 games and has 2 sacks. So you see there's some promising stuff there. And then obviously COVID happens. The CFL is forced to cancel its season, and 2021 is just a disaster in Edmonton. And it's on all fronts. He actually wins the starting job out of camp, gets a guy who is probably going to be a future Hall of Famer in Canada in Sean Lemon, but because he wins the job, but that defense just can't perform, and he's not put in a good situation. And so he has no sacks that year, terrible numbers across the board. But nobody really loses faith on him, because when he hits the open market after that season, BC backs up the Brinks truck and pays a whole bunch of money by CFL standards to bring him out to Vancouver. So there was never really a sense from personnel people in the league that he was a bust. I think there was some fans making some comments in that regard because of how disappointing that year in Edmonton was. But really, that had a lot more to do with the organization than the player. And most of what we've seen from Mathieu Betts, going back to his collegiate days to now, has been incredibly positive.
He gets a 3-year contract when he goes down to the Chicago Bears. So clearly this is a guy who the NFL valued in some way. I'm not going to speak too much to is why he didn't make that roster. We see UDFAs get cut all the time, but it's clear that multiple people in several stuff like saw this as, was this just kind of a matter of the I guess they would have been the Eskimos at the time, not the Elks. Was this a matter of just Edmonton just overall the entire system just not failing, or just did he have some growth that he needed to do between the Bears and Edmonton to get to where he was going to be regarded with the BC Lions?
I think there might be a little bit of both there. I think certainly you look at that 2021 season in Edmonton, and they haven't gotten much better in the 2 years since then either. The organization, quite frankly, is still a bit of a mess, and one of its, I think, the darkest chapter in its very long history right now. But that 2021 season was really a watershed moment for them, and it resulted in essentially a full house cleaning. So at the end of that year, his defensive coordinator, his head coach, his GM, and his the president of that organization were all gone out the door, and quite frankly, for good reason, because the performance on the field was not good enough at any level. I don't think you can point to a player on that Edmonton team that season and say, okay, they lived up to expectations, because it was such a mess. And Mathieu Betts was no exception to that. But the things that made him such a high prospect and have led to success since then were still there. The high motor, the way he won that job in training camp, there was a lot of optimism about him going into the year, and it's been proven right, just not that particular season.
We've certainly seen here in Detroit the impact of a bad head coach maybe leading to some underperformances from their players. And I think it speaks to what happened next, right? He gets the big deal with the BC Lions. He immediately gets 7 sacks the next season. And then the following season, which was 2023, he wins the most outstanding defensive player with 18 sacks in 18 games. So let's talk a little bit about his game. What particularly has made him so successful at the CFL level?
I think the first thing that jumps out about Mathieu Betts when you watch him either as a college prospect coming out or now as a pro is his get off, right? He is so quick off the line, really gets a jump start on any tackle, and then his motor is absolutely relentless. I don't think he's the most physically dominant dude out there. I don't think he's necessarily the most refined with his hands. You're not going to get somebody who's a technician, but you're going to get somebody who's going to run around the outside on that ring, who he's going to get blocked once, he's going to get blocked twice, but he's going to keep coming back. And over the course of a game, he develops opportunities because of that, because he's so relentless and quick upfield, especially, I think, against CFL tackles where, we all know how hard it is to find tackles in the NFL. We're having the same thing with the trickle-down effect in the CFL.
Sure.
Mathieu Betts is able to get a jump on some of those guys and really eat them alive over the course of a football game because he is so relentlessly quick off the ball.
So I want to talk about this because this is certainly no longer the age of Rocket Ismail and Doug Flutie and other major success stories coming from the CFL. I think the last one I can remember who played the CFL who got success in the NFL was probably Brandon Browner.
There've been a few since then, but
there's been a few.
name
I'm
that
trying to
jumps
remember.
out. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I think Cameron Wake also played up in the CFL. I remember seeing, but what exactly how unique is this story? What is exactly he going to have to adjust to coming to the American version of the game? Is there even much adjustment given his position, or is this just kind of, same story, just line up there? I guess the only big thing would just be less motion. I'll fill me in, what exactly does he need to change to really succeed at this level?
Well, I think the thing that makes this story unique is not that he's coming from the CFL. We see that, you're going to get 5 to 10 guys every season coming from the CFL to the NFL. Some of them stick, some of them don't. I mean, some of the most successful guys right now, if you look around the NFL, Alex Singleton has gone from being a most outstanding defensive player in the CFL with Calgary to a guy who's a starter at linebacker in the NFL. Is, I think, on his 3rd straight 100 tackle season. D. Alford, good nickel corner out there in Atlanta, who was a fantastic player in one season in Canada. So there are those success stories that happen, less so than there used to be, but they still occur. What makes this unique is Betts' age, in my mind, because this is a guy who's going to turn 29 in March.
Yeah.
Typically, if someone's making the jump from the CFL to the NFL, it's going to happen earlier on in their career when they're 26, 27. Once you get past 27, very few exceptions happen where guys get NFL contracts. It speaks volumes that teams are even interested at that stage. There are exceptions. The most recent one that I can think of that's sort of comparable to Betts is Shane Ray, who of course was a 1st round NFL draft pick, went up to Toronto for a little bit, was not particularly good in the CFL by any stretch, but somehow through his connections landed another NFL contract with the Buffalo Bills at 30 years old. Really, besides that, I can't think of anyone comparable to Betts in terms of age at his position going down. Now, he is from Quebec, which means he came out in the process a little bit later. Quebec prospects, they have a different schooling system there where after high school, you do what is essentially like a type of JUCO, but it's mandatory. And then you go into college. So they're usually entering the draft or entering their pro careers at 26, sometimes even 27 years old. So these guys are older coming out. Betts obviously had success right away, so he's a little bit quicker on that curve. But that's why he's older, despite the fact that he's only played 4 professional seasons. Maybe that means less tread on the tires, but there's not a lot of comparables for a guy making the jump at his age. And at his size, we know he's a twinger. That's why he didn't work out in Chicago, is because he's not really a true defensive end, and he's not really good enough in space to be a coverage outside linebacker or somebody like that. He's really a situational pass rusher, which is what defensive ends are in the CFL game. Cameron Wake was an example of somebody who was just like that coming out of college, obviously played for the same CFL team in the BC Lions and put up very good numbers and had the career he did in the NFL. There's been some move away from discarding twingers in the NFL because they want pass rushers so much, but Betts is still a bit of a hard sell in my mind, and he's really got to find his particular niche.
Yeah, it's funny that the name Cameron Wake keeps coming up because, of course, he played for the Miami Dolphins when Dan Campbell was there as the tight ends coach, obviously coaching a different group. But it's interesting because, that situational pass rusher, we're still trying to figure out if that's what the Lions, if they're going to have an opening for that. James Houston is a guy who very much fits that role and was very good in it, but they've always wanted to expand James Houston's game to beyond just a situational pass rusher, whether it is dropping in coverage or holding the edge as a defensive end. So in your mind, is there any potential there for Betts to at least, I guess be a run stopper, because that is so important to what the Lions want to do? Dropping into coverage is probably a tough ask for a guy who I imagine, 29 hasn't really done much of it, but can he hold his own in terms of, I guess, maybe some of that motor? Does that work in his favor in the run game?
To me, it does. It was a weak spot for him in the CFL, which, in a value world, right, you're willing to take a bad run defender for as exceptional as he is as a pass rusher. I mean, you talk about the 18 sacks. He also had 83 total pressures, right? This is a guy that PFF had a 90.2 pass rush grade on last season in the CFL. Like, he gets off the ball, but his overall grade was much lower because he's not very good against the run. And I don't think that's going to be any different at the NFL level. He's going to struggle even more. Can he come in on third down and long and get after the quarterback? I think there's potential there. The other thing that maybe he's able to do is contribute a little bit on special teams, right? 250 pounds. He can run down on teams. He didn't do a ton of that in the CFL, but he did some, even though he was a starting defensive end and, the best defensive player in the league last season, because everyone's got to play special teams in Canada. It's so much more important in the 3-down game than it is in the NFL. So he has experience doing that, and that might help him stick on the roster. He certainly believes there's going to be an opportunity for him there, though, because he had workouts with both the Cleveland Browns and the Buffalo Bills before Detroit. He had an offer on the table from one of those two teams with guaranteed money, and he turned it down to come to Detroit where there is no guaranteed money because he felt so strongly in what they were telling him about the opportunity. In the end, whether it's guaranteed money or not, the size of that contract, like it's pocket change for an NFL team, but he turned down something meaningful
right
in order to go to Detroit.
And I think that says a lot about, I think it says a lot about two things. One, about his personality. Like, he's willing to bet on himself in that sort of way. And two, I think maybe it speaks to what the Lions are planning to do defensively. If they've probably told him, like, there is very much a path for a guy like you, a situational pass rusher, to make the roster. And so that's a really interesting development.
I want to move the conversation over, if I may, to
Sure.
Quantz Stiggers. The Lions hosted him for a top 30 visit here, upcoming in the NFL draft. Very interesting story with Stiggers. We talked about this, I think, a little. Jeremy and I did between segments on the last podcast. Defensive back, an American, which is important for reasons we'll get to in a second. But he goes to high school in Atlanta. He ends up not attending college because of his father's death. He ends up deciding to just drop out. He ends up going to fan-controlled football at his mother's urging, plays a year there, and then gets signed with the Toronto Argonauts. Wins most outstanding rookie of the award in the CFL and is an East All-Star for the CFL in 2023. I guess I have several questions here, but I want to start with that backstory because we were talking about this as far as, like, I was confused first off on how is he eligible for, we were talking about and resolved pretty quickly how he was eligible for the draft in the NFL. But I guess my question is, I'm not clear about the rules on him being eligible to be signed in the CFL. If that's something he could do, he would have been 21, I believe, when he was signed. And on top of all of this, the Argonauts are giving him a slot on their roster when I know the CFL has the I'm trying to remember the name of it. Is it the game rule ratio?
It's the ratio, yeah.
The ratio where, for those who don't understand, I don't remember all the details, but you can't just fill out your roster with American-born football players. Some of them have to be national Canadian players. So for them to be giving him a slot and everything, and also for someone who has no background in either youth sports or American college football, says a lot about it. I'm just kind of curious how this all happens, how he gets to the CFL.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating story even for us covering the league. And to just touch on your ratio for the listeners who may not be familiar with the Canadian game, essentially the roster is 50-50. It's not quite, but half American, half Canadian. And then most of your starters are going to be American, but of the 24 starters on offense or defense, 7 of them have to be Canadian. So that means that if you are making a game day roster as an American, there's really only 4 slots that are backup slots. You got to make it as a starter. Now, of course, there's practice rosters and injury lists and all those things just the same as the NFL. But they are looking, when they're bringing in an American, to try and bring in an impact player. And certainly when Quantz Stiggers was signed, he immediately jumped out in the press release as somebody who's unusual, given that he was 21 years old. I think last season entering training camp, he was the second youngest player in the league. The other player was a Canadian prospect. So that is substantial when you're talking about an American coming up. Typically, they come a little bit later because they've done the whole college thing, and then they've gone a couple years in the NFL trying to bounce around from practice roster to practice roster. This is definitely an unusual case. It's not unheard of, but it hasn't happened in a long time that a prospect has come without any college experience. And so you immediately circle him and say, okay, what is this guy? And clearly somebody was watching that fan-controlled football league where he balled out. He was a defensive player of the year candidate, I believe, in that league. One of the coaches was doing some passive scouting and saw something they liked, and they took a flyer on a kid that ended up paying off big time because he was absolutely sensational last season.
Let's talk about him as a player too. I mean, 5 sacks, I think, in the fan-controlled football, and then followed that up with interceptions, and then 5 interceptions, I think, again in the CFL this past year. So what does he do well? Like if you're giving a draft scouting profile, what is the profile of Quantz Stiggers?
DV is not my position of expertise, but I will say I think his skill set is fairly well-rounded.
Mm-hmm.
He was at his best, like most CFL DBs, when he's in zone or off coverage. He's got his eyes on the QB.
Mm-hmm.
He's able to read and react and make plays on the ball. I think he's super smooth in transition. He's got oiled up hips. He's got everything you want from that perspective. You watch some of the things he was able to do at the East-West Shrine Bowl,
mm-hmm.
and didn't have to play a lot of man in Toronto, right? CFL is a zone-heavy game, and he excelled at both when he was asked to do that at the East-West. So there's not a lot of questions about what he can't do. I think this is a guy who slipped through the cracks because of his unique story, because, he struggled academically, so he wasn't getting into a big school, and then family stuff happened and he couldn't commit to the small school, and so he slips through. Well, he's now got something that nobody else has in this draft class, and that's a year of actual pro experience. And I know some people will scoff at that because they're like, oh, it's the CFL. What could it matter? My SEC team can beat a CFL team. Like, every single player on a CFL roster, just like an NFL roster, was one of the top 3 or 4 players on their college team from big time colleges. Lots of them, almost all of the Americans who come through, have some degree of NFL experience, either a contract, a practice roster stint, even playing a number of games. And there is tons of precedent every single year of guys coming up with notable NFL resumes, second-round picks, first-round picks, and just not being good enough to play in Canada. So he's not playing against poor competition. He's playing against guys who were elite collegiate players, just like he would have if he had gone to any NCAA school, and he proved himself to the highest degree.
Sometimes against older guys too, which is like a major thing in football. Sometimes you're just playing against guys who just got so much more bulk and muscle on them. I pulled this up from the CFL website from, let me make sure I quote the Chris O'Leary, one of their senior writers, with the headline of "Enjoy Argo's Quantz Stiggers while you can." And it seems to be even the Argonauts, their staff kind of knew that this is going to be a short time for him in the league, that he is going to be due for the NFL. So let me just ask you straight up, like, he's getting top 30 visits. What are the chances you think, given what he has, that he is going to get drafted by the National Football League?
I think it's almost a foregone conclusion at this stage that he's going to get drafted. I mean, he's an exceptional circumstance, showed out at the Shrine Bowl. I think the Lions are not going to be his only top 30 visit. I think he gets selected. Now, the other wrinkle to this gentleman that I don't think any NFL fans will be aware of is the fact that Quantz Stiggers is still technically under contract with the Argos. So every year the CFL has what's called the NFL window, which means players who are under contract basically from the end of the season roughly until February 13th can work out for NFL teams. And then if they get a contract offer, no matter how much time they have left on their contract, they can say, peace out, just release me. I'm going to the NFL, which is a great thing that they've put in to allow these guys these opportunities. The draft takes place after that window, obviously. And so technically, the Argos are under no legal obligation to release him. Now, they haven't said anything definitively one way or another. The indication is if he was drafted, they would release him. They've already given him permission to do things like the Shrine Bowl, to go on these visits, to do these workouts, which means in general, they're very supportive of his NFL opportunities. The one question I would have is if he doesn't get drafted, we get to the end of the seventh round, and now it's a UDFA contract instead of a draft pick. Does that change what the Argos feel? Do they not think that opportunity is strong enough to give the release and they try and keep him for another year? I suspect the backlash would be so huge that they wouldn't even try to do that, but it's certainly in an NFL team's best interest to maybe use a later round pick on him if he gets that far to make sure that, you know, they're making a big statement about their interest in him and then Toronto lets him go.
Last thing for me before we let you go, character is so important to this Detroit Lions team, and they have to love ball. They have to be a hard worker. So obviously, you're probably watching from afar. I don't expect you to be interviewing Quantz Stiggers after every single game, but from what do you know about him as a person?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything bad in terms of his personality. I've only spoken to the man once, one interview, very briefly. Clearly, you know, maybe academically he's struggled, but football intelligence is there, right? And he clearly loves ball. That's why he's doing this with such a unique story. And really, both of the guys that we've talked about today, I think are incredible hard workers, guys who love to ball and really fit into the Detroit Lions mold in that respect from a culture standpoint. So it doesn't surprise me that Dan Campbell and the staff there in Detroit are looking their way.
All right, before we let you go here, I always want to give our guests an opportunity to use this platform to promote their stuff. So tell the people where they can find your stuff if they're interested in getting, you know, a little bit more involved. Listen, the Lions are starting to dig into the CFL. Maybe Lions fans need to start watching some CFL. So where can they find you and your stuff?
Listen, it's a long off season. Maybe you want to watch in July while
there
we're
you
waiting, or got some time for the Grey Cup.
If anyone wants to check me out, it's at the JC Abbott on Twitter. I'm not a big Instagram guy, so I'll stick to the Twitter feed. And then all my work can be found on 3downnation.com. Check us out there if you want to read about the CFL. And we also have our own podcast, me and my colleagues there at 3Down Nation, the 3Down Nation podcast. You can find that on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts, and check us out.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate all of the incredible insight. Honestly, I learned so many things, not just about these players, but about the CFL in general, and I think that was very helpful for me. And
I think he might have destroyed his interest in the CFL by mentioning that there's a lot more special teams.
Special teams is important.
Oh,
that's right. That's right, Jeremy.
Every kick is returned. There's no fair catches in this league. We don't play that patty cake stuff. We're taking it back every time.
Yeah, that's what I love to hear.
I almost cut your mic there, JC, but appreciate you joining us. Appreciate everyone listening at home. We'll be doing more of these first bites, particularly when the Lions start adding new players. So keep to your make sure you're following us on all of the platforms and subscribing to us, and leave a review if you want. But until next time, for Chris and Jeremy, I'm Jeremy, and for JC,
and for Jeremy,
and for me, it's Cass. Be kind, guys.
Recording stopped.
All right. JC, really do appreciate it, man.
Stuff, JC. Love it. Love it.
Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on. If there's anything more CFL related in the future, you know where to find me.
Absolutely.
I might be placing some bets come July. We'll see. I'm going to be. July is hard on me, man. That's where I start chomping at the bit.
Well,
fortunately, it feels though that it feels like it's getting harder in this country to watch CFL, which is just insane because there's more streaming options, but I have to dig deeper. And now I have to buy an ESPN Plus subscription or something.
So any game that's not on ESPN Plus, they've got about half of them. There's something called CFL Plus. It's free. You can watch it for free, stream it to your laptop.
Okay.
You've
got me.
All
I
right,
have to survive this
and
offseason.
Get all your betting content on 3Down Nation. We cover all the CFL betting stuff. So
get your Mathieu Betts and your betting.
I see you do some stuff with AFI Review as well.
I have in the past. I haven't done much recently, but certainly during the pandemic and in the early
Yeah.
stages of my career with 3 Down, I was doing a lot of AFI review stuff.
I know those guys. I like a lot of that stuff those guys do. Just on
Yeah.
like I'm always a big advocate for. I want more football across the globe. It's important. It's damn important for both. I think the Canadian game and the American game. And I know the CFL tried for a while investing overseas for some of these.
Yeah. I mean, it's still ongoing. We've got our global program, sort of the equivalent of the NFL IPP. So every
Mhm.
roster, in addition to your half American, half Canadian, you've got a couple of kids from Germany or Australia or
Yeah.
the UK or whatever on there. So
Or Moritz Beringers of the world.
yeah, exactly.
Remember him?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for having me on, gentlemen.
Thank you,
problem.
JC.
Best of luck.
Thanks, bud.
Bye.
All right. I want to hang out for a little bit here, but I do have to run and let Zazu out because he was whining, which he never does while I'm podcasting. So I'm thinking he really has
wow.
to pee. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I
let him
gotta go
out.
take a pish.
So Chris, carry chat.
I have
Chat,
to
don't
car-
go
I
anywhere.
have to carry this. This is a terrifying idea.
What am I going to
I
talk
gr-
about? I
don't
I just had to talk about the CFL for a half hour.
And special
I'm spent.
teams.
All right.
Especially special teams. I grew up in Baltimore. I remember when the Baltimore Stallions came back to Montreal. So one of the things I actually love to mention, and I forgot to mention his name to JC, is that I still love John Boyce once did an article on Anthony Calvillo. I'm thinking I'm saying his name wrong. He's currently the coach of the Montreal Alouettes, but I think he still holds the record in pro football for the most passing yards. But he started with I think because the CFL had that expansion into America, and he started with Las Vegas, I think. Your dad tried out for the Alouettes. Very, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, as I said, I've been to we were talking about this before the stream. I've been to a CFL game. When I lived in Vancouver, I went to a BC Lions game. So I was blitzed out of my mind, as I usually was at that age, but a lot cheaper than trying to get into a Canucks game. So I took it. I took the opportunity to watch some football, and when they kicked on third down, I got very confused. I got very confused when they suddenly punted on third down. That I did not realize what I was getting myself into at the time. And I was just like, yeah. But if you guys have questions, I will answer any. It's been a long day for me. I was just rushing in the door when Jeremy had the podcast about ready to go. And yeah, it's draft season. It's free agency season. We've had a lot. I've been starting to dig in more and more on the draft. I saw more writing about Chop Robinson. Let's see here. TJ Tampa, I think, was in the Mel Kiper mock draft. I should have asked him about the Red Wings. I assume all Canadians love hockey. You would think. The fun thing about the CFL is that there are teams in places where there aren't usually your traditional hockey teams, and even if they're like it's not as big in a place like Toronto and Montreal as much as it is in Calgary and Winnipeg and especially Saskatchewan. Chris the multiverse of sports. I like sports, man. What can I say? I'm trying to talk. My goal eventually is to talk about all sports, not just football, as much as football is the best. You're just talking more CFL while you were gone.
Okay. Did you tell him Experiment that he was wrong?
What?
Or maybe you weren't there probably when I told him that we were still going to be live after it turned off the.
Oh, I surprised Jeremy failed to inform the guest that he was still live.
Incorrect. I told him
We
before
did.
we went live.
Saskatchewan Rough Rider Nation respect. I do like how I always remember the South Park joke about the Toronto Rough Riders against the Vancouver Rough Riders. I didn't realize at the time how much that was grounded in reality, because the original. So the Saskatchewan Rough Riders is a longtime franchise, but then there was an Ottawa team named the Ottawa Rough Riders.
I don't even know the South Park joke you're talking about, but okay, there's a lot of Rough
It's
Riders.
the one where they go. It's one of the first episodes they do with the Canadians. And they go,
Oh.
there's like a Canadian football game in it. And it's the Vancouver Rough Riders against the Toronto Rough Riders. But the joke is that that's real. That's actually was the case. I think the only difference was Ottawa Rough Riders was 2 words. Saskatchewan Rough Riders is 1 word. But Ottawa went away for a while, and now they're back as like the Red Blacks or something.
Oh. Why do they have such limited names?
Well, I guess Rough Rider is another name for a Mountie.
Oh.
So
I do kind of respect that they get at least a little creative with their team nicknames.
well, so Edmonton went the way of, it used to be the Eskimos, but they decided, given the connotations of a lot of those names, they decided, and they eventually moved. They had their own kind of Washington football team moment where they were the Edmonton football team or EE football team.
Yeah.
And then they settled on the Elks, and they actually have a very fun looking logo for it. But yeah, what do we have? Winnipeg Blue Bombers, which is, I love that name, Blue Bombers. Makes me think of Mega Man. Argonauts, which is actually the oldest professional football club in North America, from what I remember. Alouettes, which I think is a term for a bird. It's French.
Yeah,
And then,
I know it from that nursery rhyme.
Yeah, and Red Blacks. Yeah.
Alouette,
Yeah, and the Ticats, the Tiger Cats. And the Calgary Stampeders, which is basically named for the Calgary Stampede, which is like it's like their version of the Texas Rodeo or something.
Okay.
Calgary kind of fancies itself as, Alberta in general, but Calgary especially fancies itself as Canada's Texas. I'm not joking. That's why they're also into the football. There's also very fun stories. I learned this when I lived up there, but there was fun stories about way back in the day when Calgary played Toronto for the Grey Cup, when it was in Toronto. Like, Calgary people came on drunk off of trains, and like one rode a horse through a hotel and stuff.
All right.
As weird as
this is how you get me into the CFL.
Yeah. No, specifically, the history of the Grey Cup is full of insane stuff like that. There's like a dog on the field at one point. I remember watching when, like, this is even recent, Shania Twain getting mushed to the stage on a sled for her halftime show. But yeah, no, I think one time the Grey Cup broke while they were presenting it. Like, the Grey Cup has been a very bizarrely cursed game through the years. They stopped a game because they didn't have a ball because a fan stole it. That's right.
Damien on YouTube, don't worry about it. I appreciate the kind words.
What did he say?
He said I was trying to super chat, but I kept getting an error. I just want to say thank you guys for doing this.
Oh yeah, no worries.
No problem, buddy.
Yeah.
Hope you guys enjoyed it. He was super knowledgeable about everything.
Yes.
So that was if we ever need anything more CFL related, and God forbid that we do, hopefully we don't. Not because
that worked a lot better than just getting John Whitaker in here.
True. Although I'm sure John would have been fine too, to be completely honest.
John would have been fancy. John knows a lot about CFL. I'm not shitting on John at all.
He's
I'm just busting balls.
Yeah.
I am always fascinated too by the relationship, and this is something I wish I had asked JC before the show, about the relationship the NFL has with the CFL sometimes, especially when matters of Toronto get involved, because Toronto fashions itself as a very Americanized city in Canada. And you know this, in all the other 3 major sports in North America. Well, let's put hockey out of the way, but in basketball and baseball, in American leagues, there is a team in Toronto. And for the longest time, there's been owners and rich people who have been trying to move the Buffalo Bills to Toronto. And I remember way back, like, there was always those tales back in the 60s, how Canada was very defensive about their form of football, that they were going to try to stop the NFL from taking into their area. I'm curious what that would look like today if that did pull off, because I think a NFL team in Toronto would be something that would frankly terrify the CFL.
Probably, yeah.
And probably would get political power behind it to preserve their game of football versus having the NFL just squat. But
Yeah.
thankfully, it seems at least the appetite seems to be keeping the team in Toronto, which is good too, because places like Toronto are good for the league. To have Buffalo, to have Green Bay, as much as we hate the Packers.
Just
but
move
still,
the
like,
Bears there. They can't seem to figure out where they want to play. Make it easier for me to hate them too.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I love Canada.
It's always been confusing. There's more talk of a London team than one of the nations that border America. But again, I think that's the thing, is that you're not exactly competing with a native. Not that the NFL would have trouble competing with the CFL, more that I think there would be a political will to protect the CFL if the NFL tried to make an incursion.
I actually would love to travel to Toronto for a game. I've never been to Toronto. It seems like I live in Metro Detroit. It's criminal that I haven't been to Toronto, but
or at least gone to. I mean, at least gone to Windsor.
oh, I've gone to Windsor.
Okay.
Yeah, come on.
think
I
last
went
time I went
to
to
Windsor
Windsor,
when
I
I was
opened
19, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think I opened a bank account there before I moved to Vancouver. I love Vancouver, by the way. I don't think I've talked about this enough, but Vancouver, the 2 years I spent in Vancouver, like, might have been the most beautiful place I've lived. And I loved every minute of Vancouver. Windsor's Canada's
I saw Toto in Windsor like 4 years ago in the midst of the podcast's Toto phase, which I think we've moved on from, right?
We've moved on from it. I've had some people asking me to play Africa, so I'm like, I know you're an old head if you say that, but at the same time, I think we have agreed that it probably needs to go away because, unfortunately, at the end of the day, what it's been poisoned by has been the Patricia years,
Right, which is the same reason why we can't have black uniforms. So don't stop asking for black jerseys. That shouldn't happen. They've been tainted forever as well.
You're gonna have to live with the black jerseys. They're coming.
It is funny that we say we've moved on from Toto, yet it still remains the base of our theme song.
It does. I know the guy who wrote that was reaching out at one point about maybe making us a new one, but I don't think I've heard.
Yeah, he left
Back from him,
he
but-
left a YouTube comment like a month ago, and I'm like, he's like, yeah, I have an idea for your new theme, and I'm like, yeah, okay, email me. Like this is our email, and I haven't heard anything, but I almost had someone else create a Metallica kind of cover, but then we both realized maybe let's
That
not.
would be even more litigious.
Yes.
We're getting away with a lot with having the 2 seconds of the opening riff from Africa. I don't think I want to risk anything just because fans really like the idea of no leaf clover, or
Right,
whatever.
and it makes sense. Like I would love to have some sort of no leaf.
I mean, for
clover
God's sakes, these are
remix.
the guys who killed Napster.
Right.
I don't want to mess with them.
Right. That's and especially when it's not like if it was us creating it and us taking on the risk,
Yeah.
maybe. But like this is any like theme song that we've ever gotten is someone just doing it out of the goodness of their heart, and so
Yes.
to get them in trouble for something that they gave to us for free would be.
I mean, they wouldn't really get much in trouble. Just be DMCA takedown.
yeah,
Request. That's the thing is
I
like
guess.
it's not going to be a Napster situation. It would be just
not gonna sue
it would
us.
be what it is in this day and age, which is bloodless bots declaring that you need to take that the platform is the one who's liable, and
Yeah.
thus that's why the DMCA exists,
right.
to basically say, hey, rather than just suing you out of oblivion, we're going to give you this system where we're going to let you know what's happening and you're just going to take it down,
Right.
and you're not going to have responsibility from someone else uploading it. That's why it exists. There's a lot of problems with it. And I'm sorry I'm getting into my other armchair thing, which is the internet. But like it's a fascinating ecosystem. But there's definitely more focus on the DMCA as applying to podcasts than there used to be ever.
Right.
Especially now that a lot of this has been automated. The blue helm should be our regular one. Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't have
It's a tough one.
big uniform takes. Just other than I'd rather not see black unis, and beyond the fact that They bring up memories of a era that should be buried forever. I also just don't think it's that creative. I don't think.
No,
I mean, I get why black and blue works, but it's not one of the Lions' colors. They're silver and blue and white, and they always have been.
I'm just saying that I'm just waiting, and I'm just saying I'm. It's not my preference or not. I'm just saying it's happening.
I don't get a strong feeling one way or the other. The only reason why I probably agree with you, and it's it'll probably be an alt, right? It's not going to be like their home or their away. It would be an alt. The only reason I would agree with you is because I know for a fact that in the early stages of planning, they were taking notes and data on what fans were saying online, what they wanted in new uniforms, and I know for a fact that black uniforms were performed very high in that metric. Now, I don't know if they'll end up taking that advice, because the other thing that measured highly in that metric was get rid of the William Clay Ford patch, and I don't know if they're going to bend to that request.
How many
either.
years do you have to be dead before we take off the patch? Rest in peace and all, but I mean, not to be disrespectful here, but like, how long do these patches last? Do we have to wait till Martha is in the ground and suddenly we'll get a new patch then? It seems particularly grim.
McSpearman just rightfully called me out, saying black's not a color of the Lions, and I'm wearing a hat that is predominantly black.
Yeah. And I mean, if I get another Lions cap, I think my old one is wasted from time, but like, I'm definitely getting the black on black with the white outline that Lids makes, because it's just too good.
Yeah. Lionize with a good question here. It says, do you think Terrell Williams is the default next in line for defensive coordinator when Aaron Glenn leaves? Man, the way that Dan Campbell talked about him this week, like, called him the best defensive line coach in football. Very clear, like, even though they only coached together with one year in Miami, it sounds like they've been keeping track on each other and are good friends. And so, I do think Dan Campbell thinks very, very highly of him. The question to me would be, where does Kelvin Shepherd fit in that succession line?
That is a good point about, I completely forgot about Cameron Wake being there during his time with the Dolphins too. And like him it's funny. It all keeps coming back to his time with the Dolphins,
right?
Which sounds like it was a swell time. And like, again, guy got his first crack at it and he was a fun story for the time too.
Yeah. And I just, we did, I can't remember who we interviewed, but I think right after Dan Campbell was hired, we interviewed someone who knew the Saints, and then we interviewed a guy who knew him from the Dolphins era.
The Dolphins, right.
I think it was Hal Habib, maybe. And he's like, there was so much support internally for him to keep that job, and they didn't, and they went to, I think, Joe Philbin instead, and that was a disaster. And
Joe Philbin got fired, and that's when right. Dan Campbell came in. They went... let me find the Dolphins coach list again. You keep going on.
But yeah, either way, I think it's fascinating to think how much different the trajectory of Dan Campbell, Adam Gase,
yeah.
But like, if he had gotten that job, would he? I think there's a good chance he's not the Dan Campbell that we see today, right? Because Sean Payton was such a big influence on him. Now he wouldn't have gone through that era. He would have had to like get thrown in the deep end as a head coach, maybe before he was ready.
I think we have our nice little electric acid Kool-Aid test in that regard. You're talking about Antonio Pierce.
Sure.
Antonio Pierce is probably the closest analog you will get to what if Dan Campbell had been hired by the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Rather than taking, because I was saying this to some people, like, I know that the Raiders, the players themselves, like, I don't even trust the Max Crosby story as much, like, on what would have actually happened there. But still, like, if you had gone somewhere else, let's say the Raiders had hired Jim Harbaugh instead.
Sure.
I think that would, like, I was arguing at the time that I know all the energy is behind Pierce, but you kind of want to go that DC route, find someone like a Sean Payton that you can serve under, and you will be a big name in a few years. But
add some seasoning to yourself.
Yeah. And instead they decide to throw him in the deep end, and he immediately gets on a microphone and starts talking about, we're going to do Jordan rules on Patrick Mahomes. And there's about 80 different reasons why you can't fucking do that to a quarterback in today's NFL.
It'll be I'll be fascinated to see what happens with him, because everyone seems to be very much behind that hire.
He has the energy. He absolutely has the energy for sure, even though
It's
like
just,
I don't.
But yeah, there is something to be said about a relatively new coach who doesn't have the connect. Like, one thing that we keep praising Dan Campbell for is like he's able to find connections and to bring in staff, to bring in training staff, to bring in players, all that sort of stuff. Antonio Pierce doesn't have that network yet. There's no way he can.
He's a Raiders guy, and that's I think that's the difference at the end of the day is it's not like Dan Campbell was being tied by some mythical roots to being like a great player to the Dolphins, or that there's a Dolphins way or something. That all died with like, that's all, I mean, he's not dead yet, but like that's all tied with like Don Shula 50, 60 years in the past versus something like, you know, Antonio Pierce, who was a Raider, that there is this mythological, like, you know, you need the DNA of a Raider to understand this organization and everything else that he just embodies. Actually, I don't even think he played for the Raiders, now that I'm thinking about it.
Did he not? I thought he did.
No, I'm looking. I just pulled up his history. He played for Washington and for New York, the Giants. He did not play for. I'm not sure where this idea of him being a Raider actually came from. I just know all the people I talked to saying like, "Oh, he's a Raider through and through." I'm like, wait, really?
I don't, part of me like,
I was a Lion. Yes,
I do. Yeah. I do understand, and more so now than ever. Like, I think I poo-pooed it a little bit more than I should have back in the past. Like, I do understand the importance of culture, but like this idea that like this Raiders culture has to be the exact same. Like, we're this gritty punk team that's bordering on the line of legality in terms of our play. Like,
yeah, you can't do that anymore. I'm sorry.
You can't do that anymore. And like, what's like? Can you try something different? Like.
Also, and I hate this because I was getting in a fight with someone about someone who is a host about like, again, how much you're allowed to value your past and how much that just becomes rust and noise. And when was the last time that attitude for the Raiders ever existed?
Existed like, or worked.
Or worked, and you have to go back about 20 years ago. And again, at some point, when do you let the past just be the past and realize you have to forge something different for yourself, which is what the Lions did. Which is what the Lions did. Like, at some point, you have to just say, hey, reboot. We're going to try something different. This stuff hasn't been working. Here you go. Let's just go with it. And also, like, I mean, you see the results right now. The NFLPA survey came out, and I know this doesn't impact tremendously where players play. I think there's an order of operations for free agency. It's going to be money, and then it's going to be probably playing time, and then it's probably going to be
championship maybe,
or maybe,
like
or like I don't even know if culture's there. You still have to. I think I'm still going down the list. I'd go to like a position coach or a coordinator or a coach they just want to play for, or something. And then near the end, you get to culture and you get to stuff like the NFLPA is checking on facilities. But clearly, with an A+ to Dan Campbell, which puts him third in the NFLPA survey, there is something there to that. That is there is something there that is valuable. I love the survey thing.
It's great.
I find it a very fascinating look into it doesn't need to be actionable. It doesn't need to tell you who's good at like pulling in free agents, but it is I think it's just a really cool thing to do. And I think it does pressure organizations.
It's already proven to be effective. Like, do you remember last year's survey that like there were talks about rats in the building and like all this embarrassing stuff?
Chargers had mold in the hot tubs, but those were like temporary facilities. But still, like, it at least like puts it on the radar for them. Yeah,
it's the whole like I don't know. Like, to me, the survey this year was much more tame, and I don't think that was players being nicer. I think it was teams taking some of the feedback to heart and actually making some changes. You saw that with the Lions. Like, the Lions are still bottom half of the league in terms of their nutrition and food options. But if you looked deeper into what they did, it's all been improved. They made big steps last year, and you hope they continue to make big steps there. And No, I think you're right. Like, I don't know how much that affects free agencies, but it absolutely does affect how teams are treating their players. They're doing a better job of it after 1 year. And you have to imagine if you're a team like, I don't know, the Washington Commanders, who continue to finish 32nd and everything, maybe they get their shit turned around, particularly now that they have a different owner.
There's a lag time to these surveys too, because like a lot of that survey is going to be based on old ownership in the case of the Commanders or things like that. And the PA usually is good on those report cards pointing out like what has changed between when we did the survey versus now. But I do think that it's a fascinating thing, at least as an observer, for me to watch. I've heard some people really trying to dismiss it, and I just do not agree with it. I think this is important, and like you can call this like a young generation thing that it's who cares, or the older guys going, who cares where you work? You're here to win. It's like I'm sorry, man. Like these are human beings at the end of the day, and like I don't think everyone wants to just put up with being in a shitty work. And this isn't the last Boy Scout. This isn't a smoky locker room with metal grate lockers and bookies on the phone threatening you or something. Like this is the real world. This is like colleges get amazing training facilities nonstop because Alabama has to sink the money into their training facilities because they have to show that they're not making a profit off certain things. And then those guys come to the NFL. College has already set the bar of having good facilities. I think it has to be here in the NFL as well.
Yeah. So me and Eric talked about this in the midweek mailbag. I'd love to get your thoughts, but Sheila got a B-. The ownership got a B-, and a lot of Lions fans were surprised and a little offended by that. Our working theory was twofold. One is that I don't think Lions players maybe understand the history of this team and how much in terms of what she's putting into the team, in terms of upgrading the facility, in terms of upgrading the nutrition, all that sort of stuff, how rare that was. Upgrading the field, right? Remember when players were complaining about the field, and the very next year the Lions are like, all right, we'll change it. That wasn't something that happened a lot in this franchise before Sheila was here. That sort of involvement and immediate action was involved. The other kind of more cynical thought here is that she's an old white woman. And it's a little bit harder for her to connect to the team.
But also, too, like, I think when you get to something like owner, like, okay, B- isn't terrible, because these things are also...
But it was 23rd.
Is it 23rd?
21st or 23rd?
The weighting on these is kind of rough, too. And, like, sometimes, too, like, if you dive deep into it, they basically explain that's like, yeah, if you might look like low. You might be 20th, but, like, it's all because everyone graded so closely together in a certain group that just that by, like, a small percentile, you are at the bottom of that pile. So, like, on certain things like that, I think the grades themselves aren't as important. What are important are the notes that are on the NFLPA survey.
Yeah.
Because they will call out specific things. But yeah, sometimes, especially in the case of ownership, like I'm not sure what 21st means. I'm not sure how that's graded. Like what even those comments are, why you would like what you're looking for in an owner if you are a player. So, I mean, does that just apply to Sheila Fordham? Maybe that applies also to the team president and to the rest of the front office,
right? Or
something else. But like, we don't have that. You have to dive into the notes themselves to find out that specific, if anything, that specific thing. And I think maybe that is something the PA could help explain. Is like, what do you mean by ownership? What are you trying to grade on? Is it just the owner themselves, or is it the front office and everything else?
So if you look at the note, like the internal notes on the Lions ownership, it basically says they, something like she graded like an 8.1 out of 10 in terms of her ability to provide the resources that the team needs. Okay. And that ranked 21st or something.
Yeah. Again, 8, that's a very good score, an 8. So like, again, I think that's just a lot of owners are clumped up, and Tactile Puma brings up a great point. Clark Hunt, your Super Bowl champion owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, got an F-.
Weird. But and just to kind of go back to one of my theories is because I was like, okay, so let's look at the Lions. Let's say they, the players don't think they're spending enough money on them. The facilities aren't as fancy as some of the, like you said, the Alabama, the college stuff. So let's look at another guy who does give his team a bunch of exorbitant resources, has a really, really fancy training facility, spends all of the money, flashy as hell. Where do you think Jerry Jones ranks?
I'm going to say 27th.
He's 19th. So he's
19th, okay.
He's 2 spots above Sheila on that same metric though. Spending in terms of spending to get the resources. Just 2 spots up.
A lot of these are very. I think that's the problem with the ownership thing is what I'm saying is like all of these other categories: treatment of families, food service, cafeteria, nutrition, dietitian, weight rooms, strength coach, training room, training staff, locker room, travel, head coach. That's all very concrete. What does ownership mean? So I think that's a category that the NFLPA could probably either elaborate on, or just refine at some point. Again, this is only the second year they're doing this,
and it's the first year they've done owners. Owners weren't even they weren't even on the list last year, and so one thing they did last year was this year is refine some of the categories that they did last year. So like last year, I think food and dietitian were the same category. This time they were different. So like dietitian in terms of having your own individualized diet versus the food that's just available every day. So those are 2 separate categories now. They were together last year. So they're going to continue to evolve what they do there. Maybe they throw a front office in there next year. It's something that they're continually looking at, and I think they're doing a hell of a job. It's really, really fascinating. And I think what was also fascinating is that every single NFC North team was top 10. Other than the Lions weren't; they were 13th, but the Vikings I think were 2nd. The Packers were either 3rd or 4th, and the Bears were 10th. So, in terms of like player happiness, getting the Midwestern treatment, I guess everyone,
Yeah, listen. At the end of the day, like there's a lot of problems with the NFLPA that they've had with this, but like this is a very good thing, I think,
for sure
for them. So,
yeah, right. Imagine what the Lions grades would have been 4 years ago.
I don't want to even think about it. I don't want to even think about it, please.
But it would be kind of nice to like have that measuring stick, right? To be like, okay, like just to like, not that we don't know that the culture and the facility and all those things are much nicer than they were 5 years ago, but to have like actual data of the players' happiness would be kind of interesting.
It'd be nice.
I don't think I went through alerts. I think we only got 1 or 2. So let me get to those real quick. I didn't. Wait, no, those are 8 hours ago. Never mind. Only one. AP Rambo. Thank you for the 39 months. Subscribe to the channel. That can't be
Lefty
true.
Detroit. Lefty Detroit also subscribed using Prime.
Why?
47.
Oh, that's right. Why isn't that? There was more than that.
Here. You know what? I can just do all of this.
I can see them too, but I don't know why they aren't on Streamlabs.
You did AP Rambo, you said?
That was the only one I did. Yep.
I got MJ Leahy 73 with a Go London Beefeaters. Schlesinger Smash, still one of my favorite Twitch names. It's 20 months American, but 26 months Mooths Canadian. 10 bits from Woodchuck Hunter. My GF can't believe that you guys are talking about football again. Lols, 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 lols. Trust me, we'll find more time to talk about football. I'll do it. Goofy grinning. I'll do it again.
You know what? We're gonna start doing 2-a-day podcasts during the off season. 2 days, baby.
This is all part of our dastardly plan to get into either all NFL talk or all Detroit sports talk, one or the other.
The only other Detroit team I'll talk about is the Red Wings. I refuse to even acknowledge the other two.
I mean, Tigers are playing tonight. That's the fun thing about the Detroit market is you also have 2 universities thrown in there as well that you can absolutely talk about too. It's what makes the market so very fascinating.
Not college basketball.
I know. You've got the Block M and you have opinions about Juwan Howard. I know.
No, I do not.
Lefty Detroit, subscribe Prime using Prime subscription 47 months. That's it. That's all we needed.
All right. think I've seen Jeremy more than my family this week. That can't be
Jeez.
true.
That's kind of terrifying.
You saw me for 3 hours on Monday, 2 hours earlier today, and now an hour today. That's only 6 hours of me. That's not that much. But go see your family.
Please.
Although, I guess, seeing as my entire family lives out of state, that would not be that big of a statement if I were to say the same about you. If you were the one streaming, Liam, then I guess I don't want to. All right, it's fine, sir. I'm not your dad.
I'm like tooling up a few windows because I'm having issues again. Let me see.
Marbles. Marbles is almost certainly not updated. So if I were to open up Marbles, it would probably take a long time.
Yeah, no.
Plus, I think it's probably about time to get out of here because I have streamed for 4 hours now today.
I'm also hungry and I have nothing around my place. And now I have 2 different podcasts to edit and a bunch of stuff I need to clean up. And I literally walked in the door and Ruby has not been able to see my face look at him at all.
Well, then let's get out of here.
Let's.
I don't have anybody live that I want to read, so we'll just end it there, guys. This will be our last stream for a little bit, at least, till Monday, next Monday, in which
you made it sound really.
No. Monday will probably be our free agency preview pod, given that we will be a week away from free agency. Oh, you know what? Yeah, no, we'll do that. I'm thinking maybe next week we might have another First Bite to recap the Combine.
Okay.
And you know, if we're recapping the Combine, who we're going to aim to bring on the show. There's really only one name. Old friend of ours. In case you...
Rob Zaglinski?
No. We love you, Rob.
Arif Hassan?
Stop it.
I'm... Okay. Oh, right. Yes.
Yes.
Drop a bomb on it.
Who also
Dropped
had like
a bomb on me.
a very nice Twitter thread drop today too. So we'll try to get him next week to recap Combine. But yeah, free agency preview on Monday. I don't know if we're gonna do the call-in show this week because it's gonna be mid Combine and we're all gonna be busy with that. So this is maybe we should spread out these podcasts a little bit on the feed because we probably won't go live or record it until Monday.
I think the midweek mailbag is going to come out tonight, and then expect this one that we just did. Probably drop it either Friday around lunch. I want to experiment with lunchtime drops, and I think Friday around lunchtime might be where that ends up. There was some new research I was reading that like listeners sometimes do react, like although we usually drop them overnight, some listeners actually prefer seeing them pop up on their feeds around like lunchtime. Just because it's something new middle of the day,
Sure.
or for like you've listened to one and then you're on your way home and you've got a different podcast or something.
That could work. The question is I don't know how. I'm very curious as to how much reach a CFL podcast is going to be in general. But yeah, we'll see. I don't mind playing around. I didn't know that.
I'll think of some interesting ideas for the name for the podcast. I think it's not a CFL one as much as like
right. Well, no, it's getting to know Matthew Betts.
Yeah.
I did not know that Kirby Joseph got affiliate. That's awesome. So now you can subscribe to Kirby Joseph's pod. I'm sure he's going to have some fun emotes and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Speaking of subscribing, Budget Jim, thank you for the 7 months subscribed to our channel, buddy. All right. Procrastinating enough. I think it's time to get out of here. Enjoy the NFL Combine, guys. Yay. They're actually going to televise stuff.
Before we go, why is half of the Lions beat writers seemingly at a Butler game?
I don't know. Is Butler? Okay. I'm guessing Butler's by Indiana and Indianapolis.
No, it's at Butler. Yeah, Butler's in Indiana. Oh, that's true. That's true. That's why Nolan and Ben are there. Okay.
Oh yeah, they went to I think a UCLA basketball game when they were there in LA. they like to do little silly stuff.
Yeah, I keep forgetting Butler's actually in Indiana. That makes sense.
Yeah. All right, guys, it's been good. If you missed anything, you can rewatch it on YouTube or Twitch right away, or just wait till it shows up on the podcast feed. But until then, you guys have a great rest of the weekend.